Well, today I'm talking about relationships. We're starting a series on relationships that will go throughout November. And today I want to start by talking about the dynamics of a great marriage. Now, it's really interesting that when you talk about relationships, what it does is it stirs up a whole lot of stuff in people. And so much so that you know that you're triggering lots of people in different areas. And we had this big discussion about it. Is it even worth doing it? Because, people come along, they're single and they're not married, they're divorced, people are separated, people would love to be married but aren't, people are in the middle of horrible marriages, people struggling in different ways, and people in joyous marriages and everybody in between. And we're not just going to be talking about marriage, we're talking about all sorts of relationships, but basically we're going to trigger people every week no matter what we do. So there's two alternatives. You either just don't bring up the R word, relationships, or you just go there and you try to do it as sensitively as you possibly can. But I apologize in advance for the fact that I realize that what I'm talking about is going to be triggering for people today. Because as I talk about marriage, there are a lot of things in there that I think whether we're married or not, whether we've been married or not, I think there's lots of good things that we can learn about any type of relationship. But you need to go there. We need to talk about these things. I was recently speaking to a young guys group, young dads group really, and one of the things they said to me is we want to hear more about Christian marriages. And some of them said, we haven't grown up in a home that's been Christian. We haven't had a Christian dad or a Christian mum or whatever, and we don't know what to do. We hear these ideas and we sort of pick things up, but nobody's taught us what to do. And so I thought to myself, from time to time we have these relationship series and we're trying to do one thing, train up those who don't know and encourage those who do know but don't do it. And that probably applies to everybody. I had a lot of people go out after the first service that said that was a great reminder for me. And I want to tell you it's a great reminder for me as well about how we have good relationships. So I'm going to go there today, and I apologize in advance for those who may feel hurt about some of the things I'm talking about. And I'm actually going to mention the S word today, which is going to trigger a lot of people. It's not the word you think, it's another word, and the word is submission. Okay, so that's going to do a bit of triggering as well. So I apologize in advance, but ladies, it's actually not going to end up badly for you. So just hear me out. Wait till the end, because you'll all come out with smiling faces, okay? So hear me out. So the talk that I'm doing today is called The Dynamics of a Great Marriage, and it's sort of like a warrant of fitness. And if you haven't been married before or you want to be married again or in the future, this may give you some good tips. So I want to tell you a few of the ingredients of marriage. And the first one I want to talk about is humility. You cannot have a great marriage unless there is humility in that marriage. Marriage is never going to work with two proud, stubborn partners. Oh, now just one other thing, there's to be no nudging during the services, okay? So I don't want you nudging the other. And the other thing I don't want you to do is look backwards as if to say to somebody else, I hope you're listening to this, okay? You're not allowed to do that. Imagine you've got a mirror that you're looking at and you're nodding and thinking, yes, I'm taking this into my own heart. So I'm going to be looking first of all at the word submission, okay? Because it is actually a very biblical word. It's very easy within Christianity to only go through the parts of the Bible that we like and just focus on what we like. You've probably heard of the great American Thomas Jefferson. He loved the Bible, loved the Word of God, but only loved parts of it. So what he did was he went with a knife and a pair of scissors and he cut out all the bits he liked and he created his own Bible. It's actually called the Thomas Jefferson Bible. You can Google it and you can see all the holes in his Bible. Basically, he liked all the nice bits, the non-challenging bits. He didn't believe in miracles. He didn't believe in anything supernatural, didn't believe in Jesus rising from the dead or anything like that. He just had all the little bits that he felt were good. So he created his own Bible. And we look a bit horrified and shocked at that, but sometimes we can do the same thing ourselves. we can read through that and we think, that doesn't apply to me. That bit's old-fashioned. That one doesn't cut it in the 21st century. And we've got to look and see, what does the Bible actually say and what is it saying to me today? So let's start off. I'm picking a very controversial passage today. I'm going to just go right there and get to the absolute core of it. Ephesians 5:21, it says this. Well, actually the title is Spirit-Guided Relationships, Wives and Husbands. And this is what it says. This part is not actually quoted very often, but it says this: submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another. That means if there are two people, they should be submitting to each other. It's talking to husbands and wives, but it actually should apply to every Christian, because submission is not necessarily this really bad word. You may not realize it, but when you drove here today or biked here today, you were submitting to a whole lot of things. You were submitting to the road rules. Well, I hope you were. When you came to a red light, you would have submitted, I hope, and you would have stopped. And then when it turned green, you would have gone, because you were doing what the law says. When you came to a give way sign, you would have slowed down and hopefully given way to somebody else. So you've submitted to that because you submit to the government and you submit to the police. When you go to school, you submit to school teachers. You hopefully submit to your boss. There are every area of our lives, there are places where we submit. And the reason for that is the world cannot go round if we just all do our own thing. There has to be people in charge, and there has to be people that will say, I will obey what I'm told to do. So this whole thing of submission is actually something we should be excited about. And it says in that verse there, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. If you care about Jesus, if you're a Christian and you want to obey Jesus, you will obey what he says because you're wanting to do what he tells you to do. The word submit comes from the Greek word hupotasso, and it means to lower yourself, and it's an act of humility and respect. It's basically saying, I choose to let another person get their own way. I choose to bow down to what another person is saying, and I do that out of humility, and I do it out of respect. So the word submission is not just used between husbands and wives, it's used all over the scripture. Let's look at another place that it's used in 1 Peter 5 verse 5. It says, likewise, you younger people, submit yourself to your elders. Now that's not necessarily talking about church elders, it's just people who are older. Yes, all of you, be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Isn't it interesting that that word submit is associated with humility, with being humble? And so it's saying to young people, if there are older people around, submit to them, because God does not like proud people. If you don't submit, you're a proud person. And people who submit are showing their humility. God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Submission is an attitude of the heart. I often think it's like a give way sign. You probably came through some of those on the way here. And the give way sign is basically saying, as you're coming to an intersection, it's asking you to actually pause and look both ways. And if there's somebody else coming, let them go first. It's not because you don't have value. It's not because you're not important. It's not because Jesus doesn't love you or the government doesn't love you. It's just that everybody can't go at once. So it's saying to you, in this circumstances, would you submit? Would you give way and let somebody else go? I go sometimes to my favourite cafe. I won't say exactly where it is, but to get there, I've got to go over a one-lane bridge. And over this one-lane bridge, you literally could not fit two cars on it. You know, if two cars tried to go over at once, there would be a smash. And so there's this sign here that's there. And it's basically saying if you come from one side, you've got to submit. If you're coming from the other side, you're allowed to go. So if on the way there, I have to stop. On the way back, I've got the right of way. But that's very much what submission is. It's actually saying I'm not always going to get my own way. I'm choosing to be humble in this situation. So let's get into the controversial bit. And all I say is, ladies, hang in there with me because it gets better as we go, okay? Now, this is very controversial, these next few passages, because they have been misused and very much abused over the years. And it seems at first sight to really favour the husband. And it has been a cause of repression of women over centuries. But let's see what it says. Ephesians 5:22-24. Wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of his wife as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Saviour. This is not the husband, but Jesus is the Saviour of his body, the church. As the church submits to Christ, so you wives should submit to your husbands in everything. So there's the passage. And what it's actually saying is God has allowed the husband to be in a place of what we call headship, or to be a leader in a marriage. And because of that position, wives should submit. It means that they should have an attitude of humility and respect in that way. And you may think to yourself, well, that's pretty tough, isn't it? But let's look what it says. Wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. So what does that mean? Now, if Jesus was a bully, if Jesus was repressive, if Jesus was this horrible taskmaster, that would be very bad news for women, because it would be saying, husbands, be like that horrible Jesus. But what did Jesus say about leadership? What did Jesus say about being in charge of things? Well, let's have a look at his own words in Matthew 20, verses 25-28. Jesus called the disciples together and he said, you know, the rulers of this world lord it over other people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you, it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first amongst you must become your slave. There you are, ladies. This is getting better and better, isn't it? Who would like their husbands to be their slaves? For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. I want to highlight two words in there that Jesus is talking about for husbands. Wives, you can write this down. Servant, slave. Okay? Don't look at your husbands now. Don't nudge. Servant, slave. See, Jesus did not come to be served, but to serve. Jesus did not come and say, hey, wash my feet. He came and washed their feet. He became a servant. He became a slave. And so the husband's role as he leads his wife should look something like this. It's going to come up on the screen. A husband is there to serve his wife. That's what leadership, that's what biblical leadership looks like. Imagine Jesus, a husband, saying to his wife, you must serve me. I can't imagine that. I mean, we do serve him. We do serve Jesus, and that is the attitude we should have. But Jesus is actually the one that comes to serve. You know, there are some great legitimate reasons why husbands can pull out the I'm the head of the house card. If both of you are really tired and one says to the other one, honey, I'm really tired, you go to bed first, and the other one says, no, honey, you're tired too, you go. I've done this once. It's the only time I pulled out the card. I said, honey, I'm the head of the house, says I have to be the servant, you go to bed and I'll do the dishes. That's very valid. Isn't that what Jesus would do? That's a great way to pull out the card, to pull out the head of the... It's not there to dominate. It's not there to repress. It's saying, honey, I want to be the servant. So here you have the wife submitting and you have the husband serving, being a servant. You don't have the wife submitting and the husband dominating. You don't have both trying to dominate. There is this mutual submission. Isn't that a wonderful way for a godly Christian marriage to work? There's a higher standard for husbands than there is for wives. Let's hear what it says in Ephesians 5:25. For husbands, this means love your wives just as Christ loved the church. He gave up his life for her. Husbands, your job as the head, the leader, is to give up your life for your wife. That means everything you do is to serve your wife, to love your wife, to do whatever it is to give everything you can to your wife. Ephesians 5:28-29. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as they love their own bodies. Now you may say, as a husband, well, I don't love my own body, but if you take care of your body, if you eat and drink and do nice things for yourself, the Bible says you must do the same thing for your wives. You can't treat yourself better than you would treat your wife. Because your job as a husband is to give every last bit of love and kindness to your wife. For a man who loves his wife actually shows love for himself. No one hates his own body, but feeds and cares for it, just as Christ cares for the church. So obviously, the most important relationship you can possibly have is between a person and Jesus, having Jesus as Lord. But the second most important relationship, if you are married, is between a husband and wife. That is the second love you must have. Before loving yourself, before even loving your children, before your job, before your ambitions, before whatever else you have, if you are married, you love God first, and the second thing, you love your spouse. That's the command that God gives. And it says that marriage is a metaphor for Christ and the church. Ephesians 5:31, as the scriptures say, a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. This is a great mystery, but it's an illustration of the way Christ and the church are one. So again, I say each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. This is an interesting thing, and it's repeated a few times in the scripture. It's talking about the fact that a husband will leave his mother and father, and he will be united with his wife, and they will become one. And this goes back to Genesis, where the Bible says that God created Adam, and I don't believe that Adam was just a man. I think he was a combination of a male and female. And I'll tell you why I believe that, because it says that Adam needed a helper, so God took part of the man, the human, took part of the human, and he created two beings, a male and a female. And so then it goes on to say, God created mankind in his image, male and female, he created them. So when it alludes to this in several passages, it says, so when a husband and a wife come together in marriage, they again become one flesh. They become joined together. And so this is showing that there was a separation between the male and the female in Genesis, and that through marriage that actually brings that to completion. And we'll refer to that verse a little bit further on. So it says this is a mystery because it actually shows the relationship between Jesus Christ and the church. That Jesus is the head of the church. He has taken the church as his bride, and together they become one. So it's saying that every marriage is supposed to point to the fact that this is the relationship between Jesus and his church. So a marriage is not supposed to be about dominance. It's about humility. And so often in marriages, I find, because we get to try to help hundreds of people over the years with marriages, often it's about this competition that's going on about who's going to get their way. And the husbands say, you know, I'm the head of the house, and the wife says, well, he's not being fair. And there's this competition that goes on, and it's a competition for who's going to dominate. And God doesn't want us in our marriages. He didn't design it so husbands always get their own way and wives are repressed and they're just told your opinion doesn't count. God designed it so that one submits and the other serves, so that this constant mutual submission. And if anything, that it should be the husband that's going lower. It's the husband that's saying, hey, I've been told to be like Jesus. I've got to serve. I've got to be a slave. I've got to be the one that does the tough things. It shouldn't be about anyone trying to have the upper hand all the time. The wife submits, yes. In other words, she's not trying to get away the whole time and frustrate her husband. But the husband serves and gives up his life for his wife. You know, some people say that in a marriage, you want it to be 100%, so the wife gives 50% and the husband gives 50%, but that's not a Christian marriage. It's the husband giving 100% and the wife giving 100%. I say at most weddings that I take, God has designed the job of the husband to be to look at the wife and say, what has God created you to be? What is the destiny that you have? What are the gifts and talents and abilities? I will spend the rest of my life helping you to become the person, the woman that God created you to be, to flourish in all the things that you can do. And exactly the same for the wife to look at the husband and say, what has God put on your life? How can I help you and serve you to become the man that God has created you to be? What a wonderful way if the wife is serving the husband and the husband is serving the wife. I heard the story a long time ago. I doubt it's true, but it's very funny, about Bill and Hillary Clinton. You may have heard of them. When Bill was the president of the United States, it's very unlikely, but I've heard they went for a drive in the car. They went out into the country, and as they were out in the country driving in their car, they started to run low on fuel. So they pulled into the gas station and a guy came and had a quick chat and filled up the car for them. And as they were pulling away, Hillary said, did you see that guy there, Tom? Bill said, yeah. She said, I used to date him. Bill says, no way. Yeah, I dated that guy before I met you. That is incredible. Bill thinks for a few moments and he said, hey, Hills, I presume you'd call her Hills. Hey, Hills, I've just had a thought. If you hadn't met me, you would now be the wife of a service station attendant. She said, no, Bill, if I hadn't met you, he would be the president of the United States. And you know, there's probably some truth in that actually. You know, it just goes to show that we often become what our spouse helps us to become. I know that I would not be doing this job today. I couldn't do any of the things that I do if my loving wife wasn't supporting and encouraging and lifting me up and just helping to carry the load of what I do. And I know for her as well, with some of the struggles she's had over the years, that she wouldn't have been able to do what she's done. You know, when I first met her, she had incredible low self-esteem and you know, hadn't had people that had spoken positive things towards her. And throughout her life, and especially in those early days, I was always feeding with my words. And she became incredibly confident, a little too confident sometimes, I wonder. But you know, that is what we have the power to do as husbands and wives. We have the power to make our partners come to their potential. You know, this is going to stir up a bit of stuff, but you know, marriage is a covenant and it's an unbreakable agreement. And I just want to pause and say, I know that there will be many people in this room who have great sadness about marriages that have fallen over and people who have lost spouses and whatever. And I just want to stand for a moment in the pain that I know people have. You know, nobody goes into a marriage thinking there's going to be a divorce. Nobody goes in thinking there's going to be abuse or mistreatment or whatever. And so many people are not divorced or separated through any fault of their own. Often you have been the victim of horrible things. And so I sympathize with that. So what I'm saying now is not to do with you, but I want to say to those who are already married, don't ever see divorce as an easy option. Most people who have been divorced would say to me, I would not wish the pain of it on even my worst enemy because it's such a hard thing to go through. You know, many people, when they're going through difficult times in a marriage, it becomes an option. And I want to say, unless it's excruciatingly bad and there are some biblical things that come into play, it should never be an option that we consider. It should be something that we say, absolutely not. I will not go down that path. And the reason I say that is that there are so many marriages where they come upon a little hiccup and they immediately think of the D word. They think, oh, well, maybe this isn't going to work out. We must never in our hearts think this is not going to work out. We must try with everything that's in our being to keep our marriages together. I'll read a similar verse to what I read before, Mark 10:6-9. God made them male and female from the beginning of creation. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Since they're no longer two but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. That's part of the marriage service. When a husband and a wife come together, they are sealed forever together. And it says God joins them together, and so they mustn't be split apart. And that's why when people do split apart, there is so much pain and there's so much agony. And we need to have incredible compassion for people who've been through divorce and separation and that sort of thing, because it is an incredibly painful thing. It was never supposed to happen that a husband and wife would separate. It's a terrible tragedy. And all I'm saying is that if you are married, you need to do everything in your power to keep things together. And I know there are many sitting here today that have done everything in their powers and it fell apart anyway. And I pray God's mercy and his healing upon you, because I know people have been treated horribly in marriages. I was speaking to somebody earlier today that I know the husband was just a serial adulterer, and you couldn't be stopped from all the things that he was doing, and quite rightfully, she came to a place of divorce, but still the pain of that is just incredible. But I want to say to you, it must never be a first option. When we first got married, a lot of our friends said to us, the first year will be terrible. It's just awful. Horrible thing to say to people, isn't it? Our first year was great. And some said to us, well, that's just beginner's luck. The next year, oh my goodness, the second year, that's not great. People are doomsayers, aren't they? What I've discovered is the more work you put in before you get married, the greater the chances are that your marriage, will go well. But there's also this thing that we heard around, which is also a dreadful thing to say, but people said, be careful of the 7-year itch. Is that a terrible thing? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands who've heard that, but what a terrible thing. And the idea of that is that after a few years, all the wonderful feelings and the emotion all sort of goes down, and it's easy to start looking around. And I want to tell you, even though it's a horrible thing to say, it actually is true that if your marriage, when the emotion of everything goes down a bit, and it will, that's when temptation comes along. And you need to be prepared for the fact, and I had some people came up the front at the end of the first service that are very, very newly married, and already things are starting to go wrong. And I just want to say to you, the devil is out to get your marriage. The devil is out to destroy things, and you need to be on your guard. When we first got married, we were just so incredibly in love. We still are. We were so incredibly in love that we used to say all the time, oh my goodness, we could never be attracted to other people. We could never possibly commit adultery. Just never, ever, ever could happen to us, because we are the perfect couple. I think everybody thinks that. This is the marriage made in heaven. Everybody thinks the same thing. We went to a conference, a Vineyard conference. They had a speaker called Dr. John White, and he said the worst thing that a couple could ever possibly say to each other is, we will not commit adultery. There's no chance of that with us. He said it's like saying we will never get burgled, because he said if you make those statements, you never actually take any precautions against it happening. If you say we will never get burgled because God's protecting us, you'll be slack about looking after your house. And so you may not lock the doors, you may not lock the windows, because you are just relaxed. And I want to tell you, do you know what a burglar does when he comes around your house? He looks through the windows. He knocks and he looks to see if there's any window that's sort of partially open or a door that's slightly ajar. He looks for ways to get in to your house, and that's exactly what he does with marriage. And Dr. John White said, you need to say, both of us will be tempted with adultery, both of us will be tempted by somebody else, and so we need to put some rules into our relationship to make sure that it doesn't happen. So Lizzie and I think we'd only been married for a few months. We went away and we said that there is a possibility that either of us could be tempted to commit adultery, so we will actually put up rules in our marriage. One of the rules was, one of the things that we said that we learned is one of the things that you discover when you marry. You may have married the greatest hunk of a guy or the most gorgeous woman, on the planet, but it doesn't switch off your ability to be attracted to other people. That will stay with you for the rest of your life. Just because you've married someone, it does not instantly mean that your mind, your eyes will not see other people that are attractive. It's what you do with that thought that determines whether or not you're following Jesus or not. Because men, you will be attracted by other women. And women, you will be attracted by other men. And that's a natural, it's a normal thing to happen. But what you've got to do is you've got to stop it at that thought. Because if you allow that thought to stay there, it increases into more thoughts, it increases into fantasy, and then it develops eventually into some sort of sin. When people commit adultery, it is never, ever, ever, ever because they've never had that thought in their minds before, and one day they just wake up and they meet somebody and bang, it's all on. It's never, ever, ever like that. There's always been a process. There's always been a build-up, and it always starts with one thought. And what you've got to do with that thought is you've got to kick it out of your mind. And I'm going to talk more about this next week. But this is such an important thing that you know that we are people who get attracted by others. And we've got to be very firm. And so you've got to have rules in your marriage. And one of the rules that we had is when we get attracted, when we feel an attraction to somebody else, and both of us in our marriage have felt an attraction, we made the decision we would immediately tell the other person about that and get the other person to pray so that there is accountability. It hasn't happened many times. It's happened once or twice. Once for me years ago, I had this dream. It wasn't a sexual dream, but it was I just dreamt of somebody that I knew and I felt this romantic attachment. Never ever felt that before about the person, but I just felt that thing. I woke up and I was shocked at the feeling of that because it actually felt quite strong. So I went to my wife immediately. I was crying. I said, honey, I just had this dream about this person. I actually feel these feelings towards this person. And I said, please pray for me. And it was funny because during the week I bumped into the person. I felt the feelings there. I thought, wow, this is bad. And so I said, I want you to pray for me every day until those feelings have gone. I personally think it was a demonic thing. It just came out of nowhere. I'd never sensed any attraction to the person before. And suddenly after a few days, it suddenly left. And afterwards I thought to myself, what did I see in that person? No offense, but it's just like, where did that come from? And I just think it was a demonic thing. And that sort of thing has happened once or twice. It's happened once or twice to my wife. And so what we do is we realize this is a burglar knocking on the door. This is the enemy trying to come in. What do we do with this? I want to say, in some marriages, it's not the right thing to go and tell your spouse because you may be in a situation where there's real sensitivity or whatever. You need to tell somebody. Not if, but when you go through it. You need to tell a guy, you need to tell a pastor if you're a guy, or a woman if you're a woman. You need to go and be held accountable. There are some great guys groups I know in our church at the moment. And it's great, don't tell somebody, that it's the church gossip. Tell somebody that you can trust and say, hey, would you pray for me? We need to be held accountable for the thoughts we have. I have counselling every week. That's what a mess I am. I have supervision actually, and every thought that comes into my mind pretty much, I tell my counsellor and I'm held accountable by my counsellor. Guys, it is not a weakness thing to go along to a counsellor and get help. But these are the things that we do if we're really serious about making sure that bad things don't creep into our lives. It is so important as I come to an end that when you are married, you invest all your thoughts and all your actions into the marriage you have. Never be tempted to look elsewhere. Theodore Roosevelt, one of the presidents of the United States, said this: comparison is the thief of joy. And what that actually means is that when you think, that couple over there looks happier than we are. If I had that wife there, I bet I'd be a lot happier than I am now. Oh my goodness, when you start thinking like that, it actually steals your joy. And it's funny how you always think that other people are in a better situation than you. They're not necessarily. I get to see behind so many marriages, so many relationships, and nobody's got the perfect marriage and nobody's got the perfect situation. There's this other thing that people say, it's a myth, the grass is greener over the other side of the fence. Have you heard that before? Grass is greener over the other side of the fence. That is just a nonsense. Do you know where the grass is greenest? The grass is greenest where you water it. And so if the grass is greener over the other side of the fence, that grass has obviously been watered really well. If your grass is not particularly green, you need to spend more time with your grass. Now, we do not have a great lawn at home, I must say, and I do feel a little bit jealous of people. You know, some guys especially, that's actually not my lawn, but mine's not that bad, but I just Googled bad lawns. But lawns take care. And you know, if you want to have a great lawn, you've actually got to do things like get out the weeds and you know, spray and fertilise. And I don't do any of these things, to be honest, but, you know, water and all the other things you do. Like some people, especially guys, aren't they proud of their lawns? And I think to myself, gee, I wish I had so much time that I could just have a lawn like that. And I look very jealous. But I know that I don't put as much time into my lawn, so therefore I don't have a great lawn. But some people take a lot of time and effort. It's exactly the same as marriage. Look at this lawn. That's not my lawn either, incidentally. But there is a lawn that has a lot of effort going into it. You cannot get a lawn like that doesn't have people putting a lot of time and effort. I want to say it's the same with marriage. If you've got a marriage that looks like the first picture, don't get out and go and get somebody else's lawn. You know, don't say the guy next to me. When I was young, actually, there was a guy, we always seemed to be around old neighbours all the time, and they had all this time to have beautiful gardens and beautiful lawns, and I always had a huge inferiority complex because, you know, they had these wonderful things. But don't think to yourself, I'm going to go over and steal some of his lawn, or I'm going to go and live at his place instead. Don't. Comparison's the thief of joy. Just start to look after the lawn you've got. Look after your own marriage. Invest in your marriage and you will get good things happening as well. My wife always says that the best thing that saved our marriage was date nights. Not that our marriage was ever particularly on the rocks or anything, but you know, when you've got kids and when your kids are up half the night and, you know, even if you don't have kids, you can very much become ships that pass in the night. And if you don't spend time with each other, your marriage will become like the first lawn that I showed. And so date nights are things where you take a night of the week and you say, do you know what? We're just going to make sure we spend time with each other. We're going to have good quality time. We're going to say lovely things to each other. We'll, you know, go out somewhere that's a treat. Now, when we started doing this, we were very poor. We didn't have much money at all. We couldn't afford to spend any money. But don't let that be an excuse. What we did is we discovered some friends who had a spa pool, and we used to drive round to their place at night, and the two of us would just, not with our friends, but the two of us would just sit there in the spa pool and we would just chat to each other. Or we would just go somewhere and get a coffee, or we would just walk along the beach. And we never, ever came back from that in a worse state than we were. We always came back in a better state. It was so good for us. And I want to just say here, in those early days, we couldn't afford to get a babysitter, but our parents-in-law and other friends would offer to come and look after our kids. Friends, if you want to help a young couple with their marriage, the best thing you can do is babysit their kids. If you were to say once a fortnight or once every 3 weeks, I will come without pay and I will look after your kids so you can have some quality time. Or if you want to be really next level generous, you know, buy them a meal out or buy them a coffee or get them some movie tickets, although you don't really talk during movies, but do something where a couple can go out and get some time out. So we had rules around our date nights, and one of the rules was you couldn't say you were too tired because we were always too tired. There was never a week that we weren't too tired. Every week we'd look at each other and say, it's date night tonight. Oh my goodness. Even the thought almost puts me to sleep, you know. And, I think I'm too tired. And we say, no, you cannot say you're too tired. Even if we go out for 10 minutes, we're going to go. We never ever went just for 10 minutes. We went out and we'd get a second wind, and it was just so good for us just to go. Friends, even if you could go away for a weekend or even a night, We've done that for our kids. We say, we'll take your kids, almost, puts me into permanent sleep when I have the grandkids over. How did we do that when we were young? Look after little kids. Anyway, we do that for our kids so that they can get some time out. And another thing you can do is do the Alpha Marriage course, which we do here reasonably regularly. You've got to do things to keep your marriage going in the right direction. Do you know what? I'll close with this. Tony Campolo is one of my favourite speakers. He passed away last year. And he talks a lot about just investing into your relationships to make them good. And he told this true story about when he was at university, he was a counsellor there. A young man came to him who was only reasonably newly married, but he said, I want to get a divorce. And he said, I've just completely fallen out of love with my wife. And so I just want to look around. She's not my soulmate. I want to look around for the right person. And Tony said, what's gone wrong? And he said, well, I don't know. I had these wonderful feelings at the beginning, but I just don't have any feelings anymore. The feelings have all gone. Man, it's so difficult when you just go on feelings because feelings go up and down like a barometer. And love is actually not about feelings. But anyway, Tony was wise and he said, well, do you know what sort of woman you would be after? And he said, yeah, I do. He said, what I'd love you to do, just do something for me. Here's a pad and here's a pen. Just sit down and for a few minutes, I want you to imagine the best relationship in the world. Imagine what you'd like to have. And I want you to write down 10 things that you would do if you were in the best relationship on the planet. And so this guy went away and he wrote, regular date nights, would have lots of romance, I'd bring presents, chocolates. I would tell my wife every day how much I loved her. I'd leave little somethings under the pillow, wrote all these things down. And after 10 minutes, he came back and gave it to Tony. He said, that's the list. That's what I would do if I was in the best relationship on the planet. And Tony said, would you do something for me? Would you go away for 3 months and do everything on that list for your wife and then come back and see me? So the guy came back in 3 months and he said, how do you feel? He said, I'm so in love with my wife. See, the thing is, what happens is emotions go up and down. And love is not an emotion. I hear so many people say, I just don't have the feelings that I had when I first met my wife or my husband. Of course you don't. They never, ever, ever stay. You only keep feelings for a person when you actually feed the lawn, when you feed your marriage. And the way you do that is by actions that you continue to do without giving up. When the baby cries in the middle of the night, praise God, we're not at that stage anymore, but when the baby cries and needs to be fed or changed or whatever, you don't think to yourself after you've been up for the 4th time in the night, you think, oh, I love that little cherub so much. What a little darling. I can't think of anything better than to leap out of bed and to just go in the freezing cold and just change those pooey, smelly nappies. Oh my goodness, I'm so blessed. What a wonderful life. Who am I that the Lord should choose me for this job? Nobody feels like that. Nobody has that emotion, but you do it because it's the right thing and you do it because you love your baby. And that's what real love is. Love is not a feeling. Love is an action. It's doing what you know is right. And friends, when you have changed your baby and you give them a cuddle and you put them down, you do look at them and the fact you've put so much into them, the love, the feelings actually come. And that's exactly the same as it is with marriage. I've got into the pattern, my wife and I've got into the pattern over the years of saying things out to each other all the time. I tell my wife every day, multiple times, how much I love her. I tell her how beautiful she is, how lucky I am to be married to her. I say those things over and over again. And she's not here today, so I can tell you this. I don't always have the emotion when I'm saying it. Sometimes I can be annoyed or frustrated or whatever. And I think to myself, I'd love to say X, Y, Z. And I've trained myself to say, darling, I am so blessed to be married to you. You are awesome. You are just so, who am I? I say to her every day, honey, I struck the jackpot. I got you when, and thousands have missed out. I say those sorts of things every day. I know it's cheesy, and she thinks it's cheesy as well. But do you know what happens? When I say those things, I see her melt a little bit, and suddenly the feeling comes. Now, I'm not lying what I'm saying. I'm actually telling the truth. I'm not necessarily saying the truth that I'm feeling at the moment, but I'm saying what is the truth. And when I say the truth and when I do things that serve and love, the emotions catch up. You must not be deceived by emotions. You are married to a person forever and ever and ever and ever. You are in something, unless there's terrible, terrible abuse that you must not try to get out of. And the way you stay happy is by feeding that relationship. Not waiting for the other person to serve you, but you serving that person, and your heart will change towards them. You will change. I want to close by saying this. If you need help, get it. Don't be embarrassed to get help if your relationship needs some work. Don't be ashamed about going and getting counselling. Do you know what many wives say to me? We need help desperately, but my husband won't go. Occasionally it's the wife, but usually it's the husband. I don't want to go. You know, guys are these I can do it all myself type people, and they feel embarrassed. Do you know what? I've learned to accept help wherever I need it. I would never dare to try and fix the leaky toilet. I wouldn't try to get in there into the sewer and go in, because I know it would be disaster. Get someone that knows what they're doing. If my car breaks down, I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm doing. I would wreck it forever. And similarly with relationships, we have awesome counselors and awesome people who pray. Have the courage to bring people in and get some help into your marriage. And we have all these courses we do, but I want to say, if you need help, reach out to get it. And may God bless all your relationships.